It is a familiar parable. And you might be so familiar with it that you'd be surprised it isn't called the parable of the prodigal son. That's because in the Bible there are no names for the parables. But we give parables titles because it makes it easier to identify which parable we are referring to. But unfortunately, titles can narrow the meaning of a parable because it betrays a certain focus and does not represent the breadth of the parable. As I said last week, parables by their nature have a surplus of meanings. Every one of us, based on our idiosyncratic perspective, is a door to a parable, and we can each draw out meaning from them that the next person might be surprised to hear our perspective. But if we allow for a multiplicity of perspectives, then we can learn from each other, even if that engagement with the parable is through debate and disagreement. To call this parable the parable of the prodigal son is to focus on the younger son, who has been a spendthrift and has squandered his family's money. So to avoid the ruts that our focus flows into, some scholars have tried to rename the parables by using the first phrase of the opening sentence of the parable. So then today's parable would be the parable of a man who had two sons. Suddenly our focus widens and we are not only just looking at the younger son, we're looking at the father, we're looking at the elder son. So with this new title, walk around this parable, take a look. What do you feel about what has happened here? With whom do you identify? Well, in my previous sermons, I have called this the parable of the dysfunctional family. Other times I've called it the parable of the prodigal love of the father. And sometimes I would like to preach a sermon on this called the parable of where are the women? But there, you can't really preach a sermon on complete absence. So I was listening to someone respond to this parable the other day, and he said, "This parable pisses me off. Look at this. They're all having a party. They're dancing, and not a single person thinks about going out to the field to get the elder son. He has come back from a long day of work on their family property, and that's how he finds out. Nobody went to get him." So I wonder if this parable could also be called the parable of the forgotten elder son. When I walk around this parable today, I would really love to know what happens tomorrow. I mean, it's great, everyone's celebrating. Maybe the elder son will go in, maybe not, but what happens tomorrow when reality hits? When they all have to figure out how to live together. Family. When real life hits, that's when you are talking about family. If you want to get real, talk about family. And that's actually why this parable is one of three parables that the writer of the Gospel of Luke has placed in this order. So Luke really wants to get across this very important point that in Jesus, all that is lost is welcomed back. The sinner is welcomed back. So the first parable, he talks about the parable of the lost sheep. And the sheep has been lost and is found. And the people go, okay, but I really don't want to identify with a sheep. And Jesus is like, well, how about this one? The parable of the lost coin. Coins are precious, and Jesus find those things that are lost are still precious. And I go, well, okay, I can see a little bit of that. But they weren't really compelled by the sense of God's desire for the lost. So Luke then says, well, I know there's something you could relate to. How about the parable of the lost son? Let's get real here. Let's get down to brass tacks. Let's talk about family. When we talk about family, it gets personal quickly, and it stirs in us sometimes very complicated emotions. Family systems theory says that it is our family of origin. It is from our family of origin that we get our programs for happiness. One of the major factors of why siblings can be so different from each other is because of where they were born and what position. We all kind of know that there are these stereotypes, right? The firstborn is kind of bossy and a little overly responsible and thinks they know how to tell everyone how to live their lives. And there's second-born characteristics, there are third-born characteristics. And that's why when we say, well, how could we all be born in the same house and be so different? And that can be explained in part by sibling position. And these roles are given in the family, and in those roles is a program for happiness, where each one is playing out a role, hoping that in the end they will get the love and affection they're so desiring, or get the pleasure that they're so desiring. So today, when I'm walking around this parable, my heart really does go out to that forgotten elder son who is slaving away in the field, working really hard. And I think about it, I think, why is he working so hard? And somewhere along the line, he probably got the program that if he were dutiful, if he were responsible and obedient, then he will get the love and affection he's craving from dad. And that has probably worked for him in the past. He's probably been trained to notice that his father praised him when he did very well. The problem with a program for happiness is that eventually it becomes a transaction in the mind. Like, I work hard and now I deserve to be praised and I deserve to be esteemed. If I'm not rewarded with inheritance, at least I'm rewarded with regard. So this program for happiness is a bit of a problem though, because not everyone has the same program and not everyone is on board to fulfill the program we each have. So inevitably, within a family, there will be hurt and pain because not everyone is on the same program. And because the program becomes transactional in nature, they'll always feel like there's not enough love. There will be a feeling of scarcity because transactions are by their nature that way. It's in the world of things where I get this if I do this and you give me this if I do this. So if I get love because I do this, then there's only so much love to go around. Therefore, either I get love or they get love, and somebody has to be a loser here. So this transactional nature of these programs for happiness really lock us in and bind us. And so what I think today is really important for the elder son is for him to notice that he's given an opportunity to revise his program for happiness because it's no longer working. I mean, he was so pained, so hurt by this being forgotten. And yet, no one intended to injure him. And so this program isn't working anymore. And I think the father said something really important here. Out of even his own brokenness, the father says, "You are always with me. All that is mine is yours." Can our elder son believe this? You are always with me. All that is mine is yours. We've moved away from the inheritance at this point. We're not talking about inheriting. We're talking about all the love that is possible has always been there for the elder son, even with all the mistakes that the father has made in forgetting his son, in being focused on other things, in being a limited human being who has all this difficulty parenting two children with very different needs and being pulled here and there. Even despite all that is broken, all that cannot be fixed, there is still healing possible because underneath it is love. And humans manifest love in the brokenness, but what this love indicates is that there's a greater love, a love from God that is embedded with families, that could be possibly experienced there. And it is this love that has always been his, even if the father didn't show it, even if the elder son and the younger son had problems. It was not dependent on people's behavior, but it was always there from God. So, could the elder brother who has been disappointed by his father, could the father who has been disappointed with his sons rely on this infinite love that is always there? And where they are with God. So our elder son is put in a place of opportunity to revise his program for happiness. For example, maybe he doesn't need things to turn out the way that he wants them to turn out in order already to be okay. I've thought about this quite a bit, now that I'm older and old. I think about how hard it was for my parents who, they did their best. They loved us, but they were broken people, with trying to do their best, trying to love us, but not always being, the best people like every human being. And then we would bicker with each other about how, one person was treated better, another person was treated better. And now I look back and I see that even though it was so imperfect, what cannot be fixed can still heal. What cannot be fixed doesn't mean that love wasn't real. what cannot be fixed doesn't mean that God wasn't there. And so if we move our perspective from the transactional nature of a relationship to the eternal nature of love that holds all things, then the sense of scarcity disappears. And the reality is that it is an abundant life in which the Father's words are true. You have always been with me. All that is mine is yours. And I wonder if we step into that place and really believe that and experience how true it is for us, how the work of forgiveness and reconciliation wouldn't be so hard because it is out of our abundance. It's out of that experience of the abundant love that has always been there for us, even in the broken ways it has manifested. So, today, what name would I give this parable? The parable of the beloved elder son. How about the parable for the healing of the family? How about the parable of moving from scarcity to abundance, moving from transaction to belovedness in God? So I invite you to consider what parable name you would give this parable, and to consider how love has always been there for each one of us, and what would it mean to live out of that. Amen.